Welcome to the next session, which is on renal artery stenosis. And we have two excellent speakers, one to talk about fibromuscular hyperplasia, one atherosclerotic stenosis. I'm Maurice Brown, Mark Glover is my co-chairman, and I'm going to introduce Pierre-François Plouin, who has come over from Paris to talk to us about fibromuscular hyperplasia. Pierre-François is head of the Department of Hypertension and Vascular Medicine at the, try my French accent here, Hôpital Européen Georges Pompidou, and Professor of Cardiovascular Medicine at the René Descartes University in Paris. And I've known him through interactions, mainly in the pheochromocytoma world, and he was also a co-founder of NSAT, which is a European organization that gets doctors interested in the adrenal cortex together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maurice, and I have to thank also the organizers of this meeting for giving me the opportunity to show this data on renal artery fibromuscular dysplasia, or FMD, in hypertension. In the MeSH vocabulary, FMD is defined as an idiopathic segmental non-atherosclerotic disease leading to stenosis of small or medium-sized arteries, and recently in the European consensus, we added two additional clues. It is a non-inflammatory disease, and the diagnosis requires exclusion of monogenic arterial diseases and spasm. So note that this is a non-specific definition, as idiopathics mean we do not know the etiology of the condition, and the other elements of the definition are negative. So rather that the definition of FMD at large, there has been more clear, a more precise definition of FMD subtypes. And indeed, there are several subtypes of fibromuscular dysplasia. And you see here the five reports that from a limited number of subjects distinguish several subtypes between 2 and 4 subtypes of FMD. And in most studies, the most prevalent subtypes was associated with an excess and disorganization of fibrous tissue, mainly in the media, and this is called medial FM stenosis, or medial fibroplasia, or medial fibromuscular dysplasia. By recent days, we do not have access to arterial samples because most patients are treated conservatively, or because they are treated with angioplasty and not with surgery. Unfortunately, there are reports of histological angiographic correlation from Harrison and McCormack in the 70s and from Stanley in the 90s, and you see that in both reports, the dominant form was medial fibroplasia on the histologic side. On the angiographic side, it correlated with the presence of lesion on the distal renal artery or on the branches of the renal artery with some multifocal type of encroachment, so multiple encroachment of the lumen, giving the classical aspect of the threaded pearl, and you will see several aspects of this multifocal FMD. In contemporary cohorts, there have been reports, obviously, of subtyping FMD. You see here the result from the US registry, in which there was only 3% of cases in which pathologic specimens were available, and in the French registry, the same happened. Only 3% of patients had been operated upon and had pathologic specimen available. Despite the fact that he used an angiographic description of the disease, the US registry used pathologic terminology separating intimal fibroplasia, medial fibroplasia, perimedial fibroplasia. Note that the vast majority of patients had the beaded appearance of the thread of pearls of FMD, and only a small minority had tubular or focal constriction, and only 1% of subjects had this perimedial fibroplasia type. In the French registry, we relied on angiographic description, so we felt that it was logical to use angiographic terminology, and we described two subtypes: the focal type, in which there are single a single stenosis on a given arterial segment, and the multifocal type when there is at least two stenosis on a given vessel segment. This binary nomenclature has been taken up by the European Society of Hypertension, and you see in the upper panels that if on a given vessel segment you have at least two stenosis, then this is called multifocal fibromuscular dysplasia, and if there is a single stenosis, this is called a focal dysplasia, and you see that this can be nicely documented either on catheter angiography, like in the upper panels, or using CT angiography. So this minimally invasive technique helps to distinguish the two types of fibromuscular dysplasia. We looked at the pertinence of this binary subdivision into two subtypes, multifocal, focal, and you see here the result from the French cohort in which we had, on the basis of CTA and sometimes MRA, 276 patients with multifocal FMD and 61 with focal FMD. You note that focal FMD is rarer than the multifocal type. The proportion of males is much higher in subjects who have focal disease compared to multifocal. Age at diagnosis is much earlier in subjects with focal disease. Subjects who have multifocal FMD have frequently bilateral stenosis, which is not the case in subjects with focal stenosis. Small ischemic downstream kidneys are frequently found in subjects with focal disease, 3 times more than in subjects with multifocal FMD, and consequently the need for any type of revascularization is 3 times more frequent in subjects who had focal disease. So in addition to the difference in the appearance on angiography, there are important differences in terms of clinical phenotype or in terms in management between these two subtypes. Is fibromuscular dysplasia a rare disease? There is no universal definition of what is a rare disease, but for the European community, rare diseases, including those of genetic origin, are those diseases of such low prevalence that special combined efforts are needed to address them, and low prevalence is taken as a prevalence less than 5 per 10,000 in the community. And the Orphanet, which is a European system to establish a list of rare disease, lists FMD among rare disease with the number 336, and this even is present in the most recent list of Orphanet. But in fact, FMD is not a rare disease. So if you look at subjects who have undergone angiography because there were potential kidney donors, you can see that if you use catheter angiography, you find out prevalence of 4% of FMD lesions. And if you use CT angiography, 2%. And now if you look into subjects who are hypertensive, about 6% of subjects referred to CORAL for the possible admission into this trial, but obviously they were not included in the trial. We'll have more details about this later on. The prevalence was 6%, and among 1,034 hypertensive patients referred to my unit in 2011, 7.4% of patients had fibromuscular dysplasia. So it is not a rare disease. If you think of it, if you use contemporary methods to screen for FMD, you find it. And this is a graph showing the rate of new cases of FMD diagnosed in my unit by 5 years interval between the 90s and the present years. And you see that if you look for it, you find them. If you don't look for it, you don't find it. So note that these subjects here have asymptomatic FMD, that is, it's a chance finding, so probably the diagnosis of FMD is of little importance for the management of the patients. Subjects with symptomatic FMD, that is hypertension and FMD, may have stenosis responsible for hypertension, but they may also have asymptomatic FMD lesion combined with essential hypertension. But nevertheless, I'm trying to convince you that this disease, FMD, is neglected, and that probably we should not neglect, we should pay importance to the diagnosis of FMD. So we've seen that the prevalence of diagnosed renal artery FMD is about 4%, whereas the prevalence of diagnosed pheochromocytoma is 100 times lower. If you look at the delay between the diagnosis of hypertension and the diagnosis of FMD, it's 9 years, and for pheo, 2 years. And if you look at the number of papers published in the last 10 years on FMD, 122, and you look at this disease, which is 100 times more rare, there is 10 times more papers on this topic. And I try to tell you that FMD should not be neglected because it may have some importance for the patients with the condition. So again, this is the French cohort in which we looked at characteristics that are referral in subjects with either multifocal FMD or unifocal FMD. If you look at subjects who had grade 3 hypertension, that is blood pressure levels exceeding 180 over 110, irrespective of the treatment, this was the case in 17% of subjects with multifocal disease, 27% of those with unifocal disease. Grade 3 chronic kidney disease were not frequent in this population of patients. Renal asymmetry, that is one kidney is smaller, but at least 20 millimeters. This was present in 15% of cases in multifocal disease and 32% in unifocal FMD. And overall, about 20% of subjects had at least one renal artery aneurysm, and at least 5% have at least one renal artery dissection. You can notice that overall, the unifocal disease is more severe in terms of blood pressure, in terms of the presence of smaller kidney downstream the stenosis, that multifocal disease, and this converts into the number of interventions required to care for these patients. Subjects who have had at least one renal artery intervention, or two or more than two, are more frequently harbor unifocal disease than multifocal disease. The presence of multi-vessel involvement in common, that is, patients who have fibroblastic dysplasia are at risk of cardiovascular disease, like the consequence of hypertension, but at risk also of cerebral vascular disease. Again, if you look for it, you find it. If you don't find it. You see here screening for cervical artery stenosis in subjects who were renal artery FMD carriers. In the 70s, only 7% of them were found to were diagnosed with cerebral cervical artery stenosis. In the 80s, it was 32%, and in contemporary cohorts, half patients who present with renal artery FMD also have cervical artery FMD. Another way of showing that multi-vessel involvement is frequent is to screen for specific echographic patterns. The common carotid and the radial artery are not site of FMD stenosis, but still the common carotid artery is thicker, and the radial artery is thicker as well in FMD than in matched controls, and we find frequently in FMD an unusual echographic pattern, such like this triple signal, which is very rarely found in normal subjects and frequently found in subjects with FMD. Is FMD a progressive condition? We have very poor data to answer this question. We have this report by Schreiber. He looked at 66 patients with medial type multifocal FMD, and those patients underwent catheter angiography at baseline and after a mean follow-up of 45 months. And in this specific population, the rate of progression was 33%. The rate of an increase by 15 millimeters in renal asymmetry was about 20%. Obviously, this is a biased series because few patients who are in good shape will have twice catheter angiography, and probably it focused on cases we had the poor outcome during follow-up. Progression is reported to be more frequent in focal non-medial FMD than in multifocal FMD. So to answer this question, we set up a cooperative study in France. Subjects who have renal artery FMD or carotid artery FMD documented at CT or MR angiography, if they consent to participate, they donate DNA, and they have a brain to pelvis CT angiography, and we keep annotation. If a 3-year follow-up is feasible, then they are participate in a cohort called profile, and if they are referred from a distant area and the follow-up is not feasible, they only provide cross-sectional data. And we have included 500 subjects in the registry, including 300 that will have long-term follow-up, and the result of this registry should be available later this year in 2014. Arcadia means assessment of renal and cervical artery dysplasia, and the result will provide precise, documented prevalence of multivessel involvement in subjects with FMD, and the progression of fibromuscular lesion, that is the cohort, will tell us about the progression in terms of renal artery, cervical artery lesion, in terms of renal function, in terms of kidney height, and in terms of clinical events. Fibromuscular dysplasia may be familial, and this is true in about 1 in 10 patients with FMD, and in those cases they are given the OMIM number 135518, and this occurs in about 10% of subjects in the French cohort and 7% on patients in the American cohort. So we have been working hard on the genetics of fibromuscular dysplasia, involving at least 800 patients with the condition. Our data support strong genetic heterogeneity and exclude the role of several known vascular disease-causative genes in familial FMD etiology, and we found evidence of association between multifocal FMD and several genes. So I'm not allowed to give you more precision about this, and this will be available probably early in 2015. What about the effect of revascularization? We performed meta-analysis of reports concerning angioplasty or surgery, and I'm going only to tell you about the blood pressure outcome of angioplasty. For the sake of simplicity, we looked at the cure rate, that is the probability of having normal blood pressure without any antihypertensive treatment following angioplasty. You see here, if you define hypertension cure as a blood pressure below 140 and below 90 millimeters of mercury without any treatment, then the cure rate is 1 in 3, 36%, and this involves all studies. And if you looked at bigger studies, maybe less biased than smaller studies, it concerns only 27% of cases. In this meta-analysis, we look into, we performed a meta-regression analysis. We found a very significant negative correlation between the probability of cure of high blood pressure levels and the mean patient age, and this has 2 explanations. The first one is that whatever the type of secondary form of hypertension, pheochromocytoma, cone adenoma, renovascular disease, the younger you are, the more probable is reversal to normal blood pressure, and vice versa. And another explanation is that younger patients frequently have the focal type fibromuscular dysplasia, which is associated with very severe hypertension and very severe stenosis, and a better outcome of angioplasty. We were surprised to find also this very significant negative correlation between cure rate and publication year. So this could suggest that radiologists performed poorly in recent years compared in the 80s. So we believe it is not the case. We looked at the probability of complication. It decreased with time, so it's not because they perform poorly, but probably because it is easier in recent years to diagnose FMD, and in many cases the FMD is confirmed qualitatively, that is, there is this thread of pearls aspect, but there is no confirmation that there is an ischemic kidney and that there is renovascular hypertension. But those patients frequently undergo angioplasty, and this is called the diagnostic therapeutic cascade, or if you prefer, the oculostenotic reflex. And indeed, it is difficult to quantify stenosis in subjects who have multifocal FMD. You see here a lady who has a CT angiography showing clearly that she has multifocal FMD, and she undergoes catheter angiography, and again you see that there is multifocal FMD with multiple encroachment of the lumen, but it is very difficult to tell whether there is a diaphragm that reduced significantly to less than, by more than 70% the luminal diameter, or whether the combination of these several encroachments induce an effect on downstream hemodynamics and is responsible for hypertension. So we try to overcome this difficulty using transstenotic pressure gradients and using optical coherence tomography in subjects who have this multifocal type of FMD. In the meta-analysis, we had information about the effect of angioplasty, no information about the effect of medication. And in the French cohort, we looked at the outcome of subjects who had had medication alone, 199 patients, and those who had undergone angioplasty, 131. The comparison was difficult because the two groups differed by the median age of diagnosis and consequently by the median duration of follow-up. Then after adjustment for age, diagnosis, age at diagnosis, age at follow-up, sex, the present absence of parietal stenosis, baseline blood pressure level, treatment score on BMI, we found no difference in blood pressure follow-up between those who have had revascularization and those treated conservatively. So considering this modest rate of hypertension cure and considering the possibility to control blood pressure with medication, a randomized trial comparing angioplasty with medication should be considered, and we'll start such a trial when we have solved this issue of quantifying stenosis in multifocal FMD. In conclusion, FMD is a relatively common disorder of unknown etiology. It can be classified as focal or multifocal using non-invasive angiography, and this classification discriminates two groups of patients with distinct clinical phenotypes. Symptomatic FMD may be severe, progressive, diffuse, familial. Stenosis grade is difficult to assess in multifocal FMD, whereas severe stenosis and small kidneys are frequent in focal FMD. Management is currently based on a low level of evidence. We suggest evaluation and treatment by multidisciplinary teams with appropriate expertise in the domain. I'd like to thank my young colleagues, Alexandra Giaverini, Sébastien Savard, Olivier Stechen, and our geneticist, Xavier Jeunmet, for their collaboration in this program on Fabry muscular dysplasia. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I'm going to use my prerogative to ask you one or two to start with. Do you use MAG3 renography at all? And specifically, the patient who, on first look, on MR or CT, you get a slightly ambiguous report back from your radiologist. Do you go through an interim stage, or do you go straight to invasive angiography to have a look?
So we consider that angioplasty is needed in subjects who have focal FMD because frequently it is tight stenosis. The stenosis is easy to quantify, and very frequently there is a small kidney downstream the stenosis. So this is an indication, but obviously it concerns only 1 in 5 patients with FMD. In subjects who have multifocal FMD, we are much more conservative presently than we used to be 10 years ago. So we perform angioplasty in case where there is a small kidney, rare in multifocal disease, or in case where there is intolerance or resistance to treatment, that is high blood pressure level despite triple therapy, including a diuretic.
Okay. Questions? I see Kennedy.
Thank you very much. May I be provocative and say your nice slide of the increasing prevalence, are you sure this is not because you become famous for dealing with it and you're being referred more obviously from all around France and perhaps wider?
Yes, presently we are referral center for Fabry muscular dysplasia, but we have been referral centers for only 5 years. On the start of the rise in the prevalence of diagnosed FMD started in the 90s. So I do believe that there is the influence of contemporary CT angiography, which permits the diagnosis, which was only permitted 20 years ago by catheter angiography, and also the interest in the disease. So you think of it, you find it out. Now, the issue is to know, is it useful to the patient? And we have set up a program to try and answer this question.
Tom, front here.
How useful is renal Doppler to pick up significant fibromuscular dysplasia? We have quite a lot of young women with hypertension and a bit reluctant to do sort of invasive tests on them. So is renal Doppler of any use, or does it only work in the Cleveland Clinic?
We don't rely on ultrasound to diagnose fibromuscular dysplasia for several reasons. The first is that there is no single publication showing the comparison of Doppler in fibromuscular dysplasia compared to angiography, to the referral technique. And second, because FMD is frequently distal or on the branches of the renal arteries. The Doppler is good at detecting single stenosis which is close to the aorta, and poor at detecting encroachment, multiple encroachment, which are distal in the renal artery. So if you want to avoid X-rays, and I understand this objection, then use MRR, but don't use Doppler.
Alice Stanton.
While we're waiting for the mic, Maurice, I'll just ask,
Sorry, I didn't
thank
see
you
you.
very
I'm
much.
sorry.
There's a lovely talk, Mel Lover from London. From my recall, the reporting of FMD as a cause of cervical vasculature stenosis in patients in the registries for carotid interventions is relatively low. How do you manage the asymptomatic individual who has a high-grade cervical stenosis? Would it be different to an atherosclerotic management program?
Maybe I missed, I didn't understood your question.
For things like, we have seen obviously carotid FMD, internal carotid, external carotid, but the relative reporting is quite low in the registries for vascular interventions for cerebrovascular disease. I just wonder how you manage that finding in a high-grade stenosis in somebody who's asymptomatic, not hypertensive necessarily.
You are addressing the issue of quantifying
Managing carotid lesions.
for the carotid artery.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, because today I had to talk only about renal artery FMD. Yes, the same applies to the carotid arteries. The lesions of FMD are on the last centimeter of the extracranial carotid artery, and this is poorly explored by duplex Doppler. So again, you need to have either MRR or CTA to explore correctly, and you will lose most of cases if you don't use one of these techniques. In most cases, this is asymptomatic. So if there is no downstream aneurysm, and if the patient has no stroke or a transient ischemic attack, we rely only on follow-up.
So, I mean, can I just follow that up? Because we sometimes have patients who have read the literature and they come and say, should I have my carotid artery looked at? And I say, no. Am I right or wrong?
So I'll tell you the answer next year when we have the result of the Arcadia data. We'll know exactly the probability of having dissections of the carotid artery, the probability of having intracranial aneurysm in those subjects, and the medium size of these aneurysms. And then we will be able to discuss what is useful and what is not useful. But at the moment, the symptomatic cervical FMD is rare, and we only rely on follow-up.
Okay, I think Phil Lewis was next. Yeah. Actually, Alice Stanton was. Alice Stanton, yes. Sir.
It's a related question on how do we advise these young patients with fibromuscular dysplasia Should we ignore the splenic aneurysms? And how much should we screen for carotid artery disease?
So in the European recommendation, as well as in the AHA recommendation, they say that if there is renal artery FMD, you have to screen for cervical artery FMD. But again, this has a very low level of evidence because you screen for what? So if you don't know what you are going to do to the lady, it's not necessarily useful. So we really need to have more data about dangerous lesions such as dissection, such as intracranial aneurysm, for which there are very clear recommendations regarding the need to clip or not to clip, or to treat or not to treat aneurysm. But presently we lack this data because in the reports, even in the two contemporary reports, the American series by Jeffrey Olin and our series in Paris, we did not look systematically in the retrospective study. We did not look systematically at the carotid and at the polygon of Willis. But in the ongoing study, we'll have answers about it.
One quick question answer from Phil Lewis.
Philip Lewis, Stockport. Can you tell me, in terms of follow-up, whether you've intervened or not, if you haven't intervened, do you have a regime for repeat follow-up in these patients? Do you re-image them or not? Do you give them any preventative anti-statins, statin therapy or antiplatelets?
Okay, Phil,
and the same with the other.
Now, this is not endothelial disease, so there is no need to provide subjects with antiplatelets or with statin. We do not provide them with this drug. Within the cohort of called profile, we decided to determine blood pressure at least once a year, to determine plasma creatinine at least once a year, to determine the health of the kidney using ultrasonography once a year for 3 years. Is it correct? Is it useless? We'll have the result within 3 years.
Thank you very much, Pierre-François. That was splendid. Thank you.